Mr. Blom, thank you very much for joining us. Talk to us about this. I think my colleague said 26 billion rand for this financial year. In your view, where should that money go? And importantly, the monitoring about whether or not it is going to be used for what it is intended.
Okay, so it seems to me that the debt markets are still closed for Eskom. I think everybody said so much money and not a penny more. So if that is indeed the case, then this 26 billion will go to funding Eskom's operating losses. I anticipate that their loss for the year to February will be about 25 billion. So they'll have $1 billion spare after accommodating their loss. So it's not going to go very far.
So operating losses is where you figure this money is going to go. Talk to us then about the plans to try and turn around this institution. We've heard lots of announcements, whether it be the issue around breaking it down into 3 components, separate components that is, or whether it has to do with the restructuring process. We've even heard about the CRO, Chief Restructuring Officer. I know this is a lot, but perhaps let's start with the CRO. When is that person eventually coming in? Because presumably, or ideally, that person should be coming in now as and when these monies are being allocated.
Absolutely. So the first mention of the CRO, if I recall correctly, was in February by Minister Tito Mboweni. And we've been waiting with bated breath. I mean, there were names thrown around as to who the possible candidate might be. In fact, it's essential that government shows that it's actually serious about sorting out the mess at Eskom. And the CRO would have a cosmetic role, as far as I could see, in breaking up Eskom into the 3 divisions and then having a look at what assets are core assets and what assets are not core assets. But essentially, that is not a hands-on role. That is not the turnaround manager. And that's the problem, is we've been waiting for a turnaround plan from this board since January last year. They promised that they would have it tabled within 9 months. It's now a year later, a year and 6 months later, and we still haven't had a turnaround plan. I mean, and we've lost the CEO. The CEO was supposed to turn around, Pakamani Khadebe. He is thrown in the towel. So he had a 5-year vision for his turnaround plan, including turning around the rotten culture of Eskom, which has manifested itself there. Now we're waiting for a new CEO, and I looked at the requirements. It seems to be we're going to start off from where we were last year, January, because the requirements are very, very bland.
So the CRO is not in place yet. The CEO, the organization, is still looking for that person to replace Pakamani Hadebe. The question here, I'm quite interested in why you say the CRO would have a cosmetic role, because this person, I think, they've been bandied about as the key person to really make sure that they effect the turnaround strategy.
Well, and that speaks volumes, because that means that the Eskom behavior isn't compliant with what the shareholder wants, and that they have now a policeman or a watchdog, the CRO, over and above seemingly the board, to have a look and keep an eye out as to how the money is being spent and what actions are being effected by the board. It makes it a very cumbersome. Now, Eskom is already a very complicated organization to manage, with 48,000 souls all over the country, 450 different depots and venues. It's an incredibly difficult organization to manage and to turn around. I mean, this is unbelievable. So I think that if you put in a CRO, I think it might be useful to have him as an external policeman. Hopefully it's somebody that's steeped in the energy industry and in Eskom practices and environment. If you're taking a novice, really, I think it will be a complete cosmetic role, because Eskom has already been run in terms of SBUs or business units for the last 40 years. So from an accounting point of view, control should be actually very, very easy.
How likely are we to see Eskom's debt rise, Ted Blom? Because if that happens, the ratings agency, one of the last ones, in fact, that has been in our favor, that's Moody's, is warning that if that debt rises further, then South Africa could lose its investment-grade credit.
You're right. You're 100% right. If I understand it correctly, not only if Eskom debt rises, but if government debt also rises as a consequence. So we've got a two-barreled gun standing to our head. And I think that makes it impossible to maneuver. And the government plan, as tabled in the Parliament today, will trigger that ratings revaluation or regrading, and that will throw us into junk. And that's the last thing we can afford to do, because that will see the rand slide significantly, and a whole lot of foreign investors will have to flee because they're only allowed to invest in investment-grade bonds and stocks. So I don't know if this is now deliberately trying to tease the devil, but certainly as I read it, this package that the government is talking about is destined to trigger the Moody's re-rating. And that is the last thing we want. I would have thought, I mean, we've been talking about this debacle at Eskom for a long time. And in fact, I've been busy talking about it for 10 years because of the corruption that manifested itself right back when Madupi and Kusile were awarded. So what puzzles me is that, in fact, with a proper business turnaround plan, Eskom actually doesn't, and the cleanup of the corruption, Eskom actually doesn't need more funding. As Eskom, in its cleanup mode, will generate more than 100 billion rand a year free cash flow, new free cash flow, if they just sort out the inefficiency and the corruption at Eskom. Why they want to trigger the Moody's thing, that should be the last thing on their minds, and I don't understand. I really cannot understand that.
That organization, and it is knee-deep in about 400 billion rand.
Closer to 500 now.
It's a very worrying situation. Thank you very much, Ted Blom. He is an energy analyst talking to us here about that special appropriations bill.